Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for coming, you guys. My name's Leslie Grosh, and I'm Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs. I know some of you, so I'm excited to see you. And excited for you to go out into your student teaching semester next spring. Very exciting. I know that means you have to get through finals and everything first. But I did just want to mention this job search handbook that you all got a copy of. Has recently been revised, and I looked through it today, and I found it to be extremely helpful. So I wouldn't just trash it or recycle it. I mean, definitely, if you're going to trash it, do recycle it, okay? But before you recycle it, there's some really helpful stuff about how to get a job, about interviewing, and about all kinds of things that I think you will find useful. So when you have some downtime over the break, take a look at that and review it. I think it will make you a more marketable candidate for a job, and that's really important to you and to us. So I'm going to hand things over to Nick. So we're joined today by a group of people from the Professional Teaching Standards Board, and they're going to explain the role of the PTSB and introduce themselves. Is that right?
Thanks, Leslie. Thank you very much for having us over. Again, as Leslie said, we're the Professional Teaching Standards Board, so we're in charge of educator licensure, we're in charge of educator discipline, and then program approval, too, of programs that lead to educator licensure. So most of our job is very boring, but this is like the most exciting part of our year right here, because you guys are going to be the new teachers entering the profession, and it's a pretty magical time. It's pretty cool. Kind of like looking out over the crowd right now and saying, you know, where are you guys going to be? What will you do in your professional career as an educator? I sat in your seat probably like 10 years ago, and it was a pretty cool place. And I commend you for what you've done up to this point. I'm excited for you to get into your student teaching practicums and see where you go from there. So, and of course, probably we'll see you at least in paper form in our office. So my name is Nick Bellack. I'm the Assistant Director of the Wyoming Professional Teaching Standards Board. Behind me is Ashley Graham, who's our Executive Assistant. We have Aaron Zopp, who is our Office Assistant. And we have Kathy Sherman, who is from the Wyoming Education Association, the WEA. So we'll be talking to you about two things today. We really have two purposes. But before we get to that, we want to put a little carrot in front of you. So let's see, Christina and Brenna handed out this today. So it's a little survey. It's a survey on the back, and then just a scavenger hunt for questions on the front to basically fill out. And I'll tell you what, if you fill out this remarkably easy survey, probably the easiest survey and scavenger hunt you'll ever have in your undergraduate careers, you could potentially win a $100 gift certificate for your initial license, which means basically you pay $50 for a license instead of $150. Not bad, huh? All you have to do is fill it out. Make sure it gets to us. We'll randomly select it after the presentations. Today is tomorrow's, and then the video presentations. And you may be the lucky winner of an $800 gift certificate. Sound good? Great. So our objectives today, there's two. Number one, why we're here. How do you get licensed in Wyoming with your standard teaching license? We want to kind of give you guidelines on exactly what you need to do to successfully do that. And then we want to talk to you a little bit about professionalism in education, ethics, some of those things that you'll be dealing with very, very quickly, and I'm sure you already have in terms of some of your practical experiences already. But we want to give you a little bit of thinking and a frame of thinking about what our agency does, what our agency expects, what the Wyoming Education Association's expectations are as well, and really just professionally, how does the educational profession view ethics in education? Because the boring part of my job looks at that almost every single day. And really what we're trying to do right now is do a little preventative maintenance. So I appreciate you being here for that topic. And as we go through that, then hopefully we can inspire some thoughts that you can take that are practical pieces of advice that you can take through your practicum and beyond. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn things over to Ashley right now because Ashley is very savvy in terms of getting people through the licensure process. So she'll be taking you through this next part of how to get licensed. So for this field, questions are very welcome. We ask that you save your Specific questions toward the end. We'll be here for as long as we need to be after the presentation to field your specific questions. General questions, we ask that you probably say those to the end as well, so write them down. But we are here as a resource for you. Okay? So, without further ado, here's Ashley.
Hi. Really quickly, I'm just going to caveat my part. We're going to go over the application fairly quickly because everyone here has applied for their supplement already, correct? Is there anyone that hasn't? Okay, so all of you are familiar with our website, our application process. We're just going to briefly go over the initial application process, but most of it's covered because you've already done the supplement. So, first of all, our applications page. Right now, it's the initial first-time reinstatement license. That is the specific application you want to go to when you're ready to apply. And that's important because right now, all of our applications look very similar. So that can delay your processing if you submit the wrong application. So that's why we want to make sure we get you to the right one. So very briefly, this is what we're going to go over. Each slide corresponding to this one is going to have a nice little picture to go with it, and so I'll go over them with that. Okay, so for number 1, the application form, section 1 and 2, complete and signed. So this is what we call our legal page. And this is where things can get a little bit confusing. How I was talking about before, we get people who submit the wrong applications. Every single one of our applications has this page, and the only thing that you can tell that differentiates each one is the title at the very top. And you can see where it says initial or reinstatement license. So make sure you have that one. We are working on updating our applications to hopefully simplify this process. So until then, just be sure that you're completing the correct one. Make sure you answer all of the questions and sign and date it and all the demographics at the top. And for you guys, you'll be selecting the classroom teacher. It's very general, but it includes all of your endorsement areas. The institutional recommendation, which I will go over here in a minute, that's how we specify what we're going to license you for. The fees, so because you are going to be UW graduates, that's what determines in-state. So you get the lovely $150 fee instead of the $200. And then the payment options, we take all major credit cards and debit cards other than American Express, and checks. Okay, here's one that's really important, especially as you get eager to submit your application right after you graduate. You want to wait and check with the registrar's office and make sure that before you order your transcripts for us, that first of all, you're going to order official transcripts, but make sure that when you're ordering them, that your degree is going to be posted. Sometimes we run into problems where students get a little bit too ahead of themselves and they order the transcripts before the degree is posted, and then they have to pay for more and order more, and it delays your application. So just be mindful of that when you're ordering your transcripts. This is the institutional recommendation. This, I believe, Vicky fills out correct. Leslie said that in your student teaching manual, Vicky's information is contained in that. So once you guys complete all your stuff, you can contact or probably email. Yeah.
Yeah, so the institutional recommendation is the form that we fill out to say, yes, you've completed a program at the University of Wyoming that is approved for licensure. Okay? So in the very back of your student teaching handbook, which you already should have, there's a page that says, how do I get licensed in Wyoming and how do I get licensed in other states? Regardless of what state you're looking for licensure in, you're going to go through the Office of Teacher Ed, let Vicki know there that you're wanting an institutional recommendation, and she'll give you the information you need to go through that process. Okay? And again, just like Ashley said, we can't provide an institutional recommendation until after the degree has posted. So that means you have to have completed your residency or student teaching semester, the grade has gone in for that, and then sometime after that, your degree gets posted after the degree analyst in the registrar's office make sure that you've met all the requirements. So there's a little bit of a delay up front there. That should not stop you sending your institutional recommendation form to the Office of Teacher Ed to get filled out. So go ahead and do that. Vicki does those in the order that they are received. So if you're the very first one to submit your IR form, as soon as degrees are posted, you'll be the very first one to get it back so you can submit it with your application to the PTSB. Does that make sense?
So I just have a question. So what has to be posted on your transcript before you can apply for licensure?
For your degree.
I thought I saw that somewhere. Question 2.
Okay, with the institutional recommendation too, that is how we determine what you get licensed for. So without that, you don't get licensed. And another thing with this is, because you kind of have to do the waiting game on a couple of things, make sure everything's sent directly to you. You put your packet together and then you send it to PTSB once you have all of the required documents put together in one envelope. With that though, as we go to the next slide, which discusses praxis, have you taken praxis yet? Some have? Okay. For those of you that have taken praxis, you may have had it sent directly to PTSB or you may not. That's fine either way. Just make sure that you retain a copy. It doesn't have to be official, just whether they emailed it to you or whatever. We just need a copy of that, and you can include that in with your application just to kind of smooth that process. Because Praxis does send praxis reports directly to us, but that's Erin could probably speak on that a little bit more. She's our lovely lady that enters those in for our office, but it can be a delayed process in us getting those entered in. So the easiest thing for you, just to make sure you're covered, is just take a copy of your own personal records that you received and include those in with your application, and then you know you're taken care of with that. With Praxis, the Praxis is aligned with UW, and we just confirm. We do need those, especially for elementary education and social studies. Without that, due to the No Teacher Left Behind, we weren't able to. No child. What did I say? We don't want to leave you guys behind. Sorry. But yeah, is there anything on the Praxis?
No, just the one thing about that is the districts, especially for elementary and social studies, right now there's highly qualified employees. So essentially PTSB can license you with an IR from Leslie, but a district's not going to hire you because you're not highly qualified. So it's really important to have those praxis tests, especially for those two areas, elementary and social studies, because when we talk about marketability, which might be the first part of the presentation today, you're not marketable if you're not highly qualified. So ensure that you have that done. It's just districts are going to ask for it, so it's definitely something you want to anticipate and just have done.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Erin. Erin is an awesome resource, so if you guys have any questions after, she's probably one of the first two people that if you call in that you're going to get. So she's a great resource, and she's going to cheek out with our licensing specialist, and she's just going to give you some helpful tips.
So Trisha, Nanette, and Morgan are the PTSB licensing specialists, and they came up with a list of things to keep in mind when applying. Most applications that cannot be processed are because the applicant didn't fully read and follow the instructions. So when you're filling out your application, it is very important to fully read them and follow them carefully to avoid any delays. Some examples when you don't follow the instructions would be if you're missing pages from the application, or if you submit the wrong application, what Ashley was saying at the beginning. When submitting your official transcripts, the degree must be posted, so that post-bac students do not earn a degree. In the winter months, applications typically take about 2 to 6 weeks to process. In the springtime and in the summertime months, applications take up to 12 weeks for processing. Applicants sometimes prolong the application process by not paying the correct amount. If you ever have any questions about not just the cost, but anything about the applications, please call. Normally you'll either get me personally, and my name's Erin, or our receptionist, Jessie. And then from there, if you have more specific questions, we can always go to the right licensing specialist. And then finally, keep in mind that incomplete applications will significantly delay the process. So if you're already looking at a 12-week process, imagine a longer delay. And it could lead to your application getting canceled. So yeah, that's exactly what you'll want to keep in mind when you finally are ready to submit your application.
And just as kind of a capper to that, that's pretty much essentially what you're going to have to do in order to apply for licensure with the state of Wyoming. So as I said, if it's a different state, different jurisdictions have different requirements for licensure. So no matter where you go, it's going to be important to really spend some time and look at the licensing entity in that state and make sure that you know their process too. You can see, if there's one thing that you can see in this process, is that if you don't have one thing, it can really substantially slow your application down for you to be licensed. And that's never a good thing. It's just make sure you follow these directions, make sure that everything's completed, and if in doubt, give us a call. You're not going to bother us. That's what we're here for. We're here to be your resource. So, with that, if you do have questions, I again ask you to write those down. We'll be here to take some specific questions for that. But other than that, I think that's pretty much what we have for our licensure part of things. Thumbs up if you understand. Thumbs to the side if you're kind of like, you know what, I got a couple questions. Thumbs up if you call us if you have a question. This is going to work for elementary. Secondary tomorrow? No problem. All right. So, to the next part of our presentation. And again, we're not here to worry you. We're not here to tell you, oh my gosh, and scare you, do any tactics like that. What we're trying to do is we're getting you to think about professionalism in education. Again, we're trying to be proactive in terms of having teachers think from a unified front of what professionalism is, and then setting some expectations and really just some realities of what people expect of you. Because the Professional Teaching Standards Board has expectations for you once you hold a license. Your local school district has expectations for you. Your supervising teacher has expectations for you. The local school board has lots of expectations for you. And just the general education community at large has some expectations to you. So we'll be successful in the end of this if we get you to think a little bit differently about how many ethical expectations come at you as educators from the time of right now, as you are preparing to go into your pre-service practicum, to when you first start as an educator and then beyond. So it's really about ethics. There's a lot of things that have been discussed, especially in the past few years in developments with ethics for educators, and we kind of want to bring those to light for you and then just give you some food for thought. So if you leave today, it's a kind of different way of thinking about addressing a situation, or not necessarily being more cautious, but just being a little bit more background in terms of some of the decisions that you make, we will be successful. Suppose I start today by saying, if you I don't want to do that, like look to your left, look to your right, one of you is going to make a mistake. It's not a statistic. Really, if you all look to your left and look to your right, you may see one person in this room that might have some action taken against their license, statistically, if you want to look at that from a national standpoint. But if we can prevent one person from potentially sliding on that slippery slope of ethical behavior, our job is done. Because if we don't, then Ashley and I have to do a lot of work. It's a tough process once an educator actually gets into the discipline system. So, professionalism. Each profession has ethical expectations imparted on its members to uphold their responsibility toward preserving the sanctity of trust. Do a pregnant pause right there, and you look down at your survey, or your scavenger hunt. The sanctity of trust. To those who are under their authority in their position as a professional. So some of the stuff that we've been talking about lately, really kind of getting a framework of ethics in education, is with this. There's this new thing called the Model Code of Ethics for Educators that really deals with professional thinking. In fact, Dr. Rush is on our committee. In fact, Dr. Rush is on our Professional Teaching Standards Board as one of our 13 members. And we're looking at our conduct guide, and we're looking at this Model Code of Ethics for Educators alongside our conduct guide. And really, it's kind of got some tenets to it. And those tenets are, you have a responsibility toward the profession. You have a responsibility toward professional competence. You have a responsibility, of course, to your students. You have a responsibility to parents, guardians, colleagues, the community, and employers. and you have professional responsibility for the ethical use of technology. So essentially, as we get into this, what we're thinking about here is we're talking about your responsibility to be a professional, pre-service, initial licensure, in-service, professional development as you continue to grow in your professional capacity, and then your continued licensure as you become that, you get past your third year of teaching, you get into your fifth year of teaching, you're a veteran teacher, and then all of a sudden you start mentoring teachers. All those professional expectations that eventually you'll have and can kind of pin on as your service badge through your educational career. We have this ethical equilibrium, and I think this is kind of an important chart, kind of boring, but it makes sense. Because really, what are people looking at you in terms of you as an educator? You have your community looking at you. You have the dispositional framework, the professional attitudes, values that you have as you go through this program that you dub, as you go through your service learning, as you go through your practicum. There are certain professional expectations that will be imparted on you. But as you get licensed, there's a regulatory framework that is imparted on you too, and rules and regulations that you're under. Because if you agree to get licensed by the Professional Teaching Standards Board, you agree to all this stuff. It's kind of like that Aladdin thing. When Aladdin gets Jafar, and Jafar goes into the thing and say, yeah, we can get it, and all the stuff that comes with it. So, do you guys remember that? Yes? Okay. A lot of blank stares. Not that. And then there's the ethical framework, the professional attitudes and ethical standards that guide decision-making. And that guidance of decision-making is kind of where we're going at to today. We're really thinking about how do you address a situation. So that's the ethical equilibrium. It's not just, yes, I'm a teacher, I'm expected to be ethical. It's, yes, I'm a teacher, I have community expectations, I have professional expectations, and I have licensure expectations too that hold me to a degree of professionalism. And I need to uphold those. And if I don't, sometimes there's consequences. So, this right here is my gray area circle of example. It's a visual, it's pretty easy to memorize, but if you look at that and you gaze at that for a long time, all of a sudden, is it happening to anybody yet? The gray area is going away? Anybody? Keep staring. So as I talk, keep staring. It should disappear. If it doesn't, it's totally failed. Sorry. But if you look at this and you print this off, the gray area disappears. And this is really just a visual to show you that teaching is about operating successfully in the gray area. You're going to have plenty of times where you're with a student making ethical decisions, and really just decisions that can go a lot of different ways. So essentially, we like to think of things and we operate best when things are black and white. So it's the right decision or it's the wrong decision. Teaching, it's not that way. I'm sure you all have already realized that already in your service learning. There's a lot of decisions that you have to make, and you have to operate in that gray area. New thinking around ethics and education is successfully operating in that gray area. So the whole point of this visual is if you keep your eye on the black dot on what's wrong, you neglect the gray area that you have to operate in. And unless you keep your eyes moving back and forth and looking at the situation and seeing how the situation can unfold, you're not going to really keep that gray area in focus. So does that make sense? All right. So we have an ethical dilemma here. And this is kind of a case study. And one of the things that Ashley and I go to this Professional Practices Institute. We go through all these anecdotes of teachers that have made the wrong decision. And the whole idea is, why did the teacher make the wrong decision? So this is an anecdote to find out exactly how you would react to this situation. And I actually like to call on some people. So you have to use your teacher voice. You have to kind of tell me what you would do in this situation. So there's this guy. He's like, man, that was such a long and tough day. By the way, this guy is into student teaching in a practicum. That's why he's in a parking lot with nobody else there in the middle of the night, because he's working his can off and he's didn't even get paid for it. It's the reality of student teaching, right? I went through it. You're about to go through it. You work really hard. So, number one thing is this guy's pretty stressed out, right? He wants to make sure that he's going to make the grade, finish his practicum successfully, and then all of a sudden this happens. 16-year-old in the parking lot on her cell phone. Man, wish somebody would pick me up. Will anybody pick me up? So the question is, what would you do in this situation? I hear the no, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. All right. So what if I kind of put in the context too that this is not necessarily the safest context? If you leave this girl alone, what potentially could happen? Why don't you turn and talk to your neighbor? What potentially could happen in this situation? All right. Hands up, thumbs up if you got something. What's going to happen? Brenna or Christine, since you're the only two people I know here.
All right. Well, so what I would personally do is either just, I would call a cab if like her family's not going to come pick her up. Because even if I do know this student, that could be a big no-no if you take them home and you see like your principal drive by and you're like, oh, why do you have a 15-year-old in your car, whatever. Like, so you don't, I wouldn't give her a ride home. Or if it was a dude, I wouldn't give him a ride home either. But I would call a cab and wait for them to come pick her up, or him up, and then follow them to their house, and then just make sure that they go home.
Are you going to pay for that, Kevin?
Sure. I'm not, well, I don't want, it's either that or your licensure. It's like, what's more important?
So what's the implications of you paying for that cab? Because you got her home safely. When you talk to that parent the next time, what's that parent going to do?
Why'd you pay for it? I don't know. Maybe she doesn't have her money with her.
Could be. And Beck? Sorry?
Call the police.
Call the police! Yeah, but you're in Matizzi. Do you know what the response time in Matizzi is? 40 minutes. You know how cold it gets in Matizzi? It's really chilly. That's right, yeah. So, okay, you can call the police. Police is definitely a great answer. That's an A answer. Who, raise your hand if you mentioned anything about the principal. Yeah, just a few people. Who's the head of the school? Whose problem is this? Is it your problem or is it the principal's problem? Well, some people might say it's the principal's problem, and I would say, yeah, you probably should call your boss and say, hey, I've got this situation, and guess what? You're responsible for this school, so you probably should come here and either escort me with you and her home, so there's somebody to have my back, and because who knows what can happen on that ride home, right? We've seen some situations, some actual real situations, where the teacher decided to take the gal home. And guess what happened? Instagram. And guess what happened on Instagram? It went viral through the district. And was it a ride home? No, it wasn't. Was there a lot of stuff that had to be dealt with? You bet. So it's really about talking about what potentially could happen. It's not about, oh my gosh, don't do that. Because you know what the number one thing here is? We're all teachers. It's the safety of students, right? We're not just going to leave her to either freeze or who knows what. You got to do something. And there's an ethical gray area right there to maintain safety of the student, but then maintain the safety of your career. Because if something really does happen, and you go into this gray area of, ooh, I'm going to take her home because that's the right thing to do, and then all these other things happen, that's a potential career ender for you. And I'm just kind of calling it straight like that because that's what you need to really kind of realize. You know, the best intentions can be preserved if you do a little bit of thinking around the situation. Call that principal. Call the police. Make sure there's a couple people there. It's really, really an important thing to do. You're not inconveniencing anybody because it's your job. Just as it is your job because you came into this situation in the middle of the night to take care of this person, you're surrounded by a community of professionals too to help you do your job the correct way, the ethical way, so maintain ethics, but also maintain a level of professionalism that you can defend yourself. Make sense? So, hands up in the air. A little bit of different thinking. You see that where situations can kind of go awry? You good? All right. So, let's talk a little bit about this. So, there's this quick quiz that we have about what you could do and what decisions can actually happen for a student. And what I want to do is I want to actually give this over to Kathy Sherman. She's going to take this next section of the presentation to talk a little bit about how to prevent some of those things. So Kathy?
Greetings, it's good to see you. I have a bit of a scratchy throat, so if you can't hear me, wave at me or something so I can try and talk a little louder. The Wyoming Education Association is your professional organization. I hope that you'll consider joining when you become a teacher, but also while you're doing your student teaching. We can offer professional development for you throughout your career. We also are there to help in situations such as Nick just presented, where perhaps something untoward comes up. We're there to try to defend you and help you get through that situation. We're hoping that doesn't happen to you, and it really does only happen to a very small percentage of our members, thank goodness. But we want to be there for you. Excuse me. Okay, so to negatively influence a student for a lifetime, how many decisions does it take? Only one, that's right. It's pretty frightening what an impact you can have on a child that will carry through for the rest of his or her life. So please be cognizant of that at all situations, whether it's in the classroom or when you see them outside of the classroom. How often are teachers expected to make a decision in a typical school day? Any idea? Somebody shout out a number.
1,000. 750.
Oh.
So really the statistic for that is, it's really not a solid statistic, but it is in the thousands. People have actually done studies on this, and it's in the thousands of decisions every day.
Okay, so, and you know that any of those decisions can affect a child positively or negatively. So what are you going to do if you find out that you did something that's not a professional decision? The first thing I would suggest is that you contact your boss and alert them to the situation. It's always best to be upfront with things and not try to hide them. We had a situation where, well, we'll get into the texting thing in a bit. Texting's a whole nother world. So, you want to go through this? Do you have this thing so that it's okay?
Essentially what we're trying to do here is talk to you about the really gear that you need as a teacher. So we have a situation where you think you're in your classroom and you got all your gear, but then an unintended situation happens. You can see that coming, and then the one tool that you need is just out of your reach. So what do? Freaking out's not an option. So it's really about having that professional background knowledge to effectively go through a situation. Every single, we did this last year too, I really apologize for this guy's pasty white legs, but the picture kind of shows exactly what it is. So, essentially, getting back into this ethical conversation, it's having the correct gear and knowing exactly what to do and then when to do it in order to not just keep kids safe, but also keep you safe too.
One of the first things I would suggest you do when you get into the district where you do your student teaching is to get a hold of the teacher handbook and also the student handbook so that you know what students and parents are being told, but also what you're expected as a teacher to do. This is going to be a really different situation for you. And speaking from way back in the day when I did that, you're probably going to get stopped a lot in the hall and asked for a pass because you still look young enough that they're not going to necessarily think that you're a teacher, which is all the more reason for you to dress professionally and behave professionally so that they can tell you from the students. Hopefully some of the students, or the majority, would be professional as well, but get a hold of the policies and those things. I would hope that your supervising teacher would introduce you to some of those documents, but if not, please take it on yourself and do that. Same thing when you get into a permanent position, those are the things you want to read first. It explains, for instance, on the, thank you, on the teacher handbook, it's going to explain a lot of the policies in the board policies that pertain to you. One of the big ones that you're going to need to know about is ethical use of electronic media, so that you know what you can and cannot show in your classroom or use in your classroom. So that would just be a suggestion. Okay, so always remember that there's a personal you and a professional you. And those have to be kept really separate. It's very important, and I know particularly in a small town, it's going to be difficult to keep those two apart because there aren't a lot of other people there for you to socialize with or whatever if you're in a really small town. Please don't share anything personal as far as contact information with parents or with students. Don't give out a personal Facebook address or page. Don't give them your text number, your cell phone number, your email. That's all to be kept separate from them. As you can see, I mean, there are so many apps out there that we all use on a daily basis, and none of that ever goes away. Some of the cases I'm representing right now, that's been the problem, is that they put it on something, they thought it was private, they thought it would go away, or whatever, and of course, it's been shared somewhere, including some of the people that I represent have copies of things that was sent to them in a confidential manner. So, there are some things that you can use to help manage those changes, or those keep those two things separate. Again, look at your technology policy in your district. But there are certain apps, such as these that are listed on the slide, where you can go in and send a text to a parent, but in an anonymous sort of fashion, as far as they can't come back to your personal site. It'll come from you, but it'll be a different address that'll just be linked to the school or your classroom. Please always be respectful of your colleagues. You're all in it together, and you're all there to help each other. And we would hope that you would treat each other with respect, but also be as helpful as you can to one another. Absolutely no drugs, no alcohol, no illegal substances. If you go out on a professional development day for lunch, it's not okay, even if you're of age, to have a beer at lunch. You're still on district time. And we have that come up every single year, so please don't do things like that. Respect other people's culture, beliefs, and differences. That means not just your students, but also their parents and the people that you work with. We have occasionally had problems in Wyoming, very few, I'm proud to say, that when people give assessments, student assessments, there has on a very rare occasion been a situation of cheating, as in feeding the answers to the kids or reading it just so with certain inflection that would assist them. In that case, you've not only jeopardized your position, well, you probably have lost your position in any future position, but also it ends up causing huge problems for the students themselves. They can't get the help they need if you are dishonestly assisting them. Always remember confidentiality, and I actually can say that that has to apply not just to information about your students, but about your colleagues as well, and you would expect them to do the same about you. Some of you will end up being, in fact, probably the majority of you will at some point in your career end up being either some sort of a team coach, perhaps debate or speech, or be a music director, or maybe the cheerleader coach, or whatever, a coach for sports and so on. That means you're going to have a budget and money that you have to be in charge of. Above all, keep copies of everything, be very transparent, always deal with things in a front-forward way as far as how you deal with the finances, and that'll keep you safe. Yes?
With that, be very careful to not commingle the funds with your own funds, even if you are going to have record of you directly putting it back. It just gets messy, so never ever deposit a check in your own account, even if you show record of you putting it back where it's supposed to be. We've seen that just not end well. So even though your intentions are in the right place, talk to your administrator and find out how to appropriately cash checks and all of that.
Thanks. Okay, so I promised that we would talk about texting and emailing. I have to say those are the things that get more people in trouble than anything else. A good rule of thumb is if you can read it aloud to your superintendent and or your mother, hopefully that means it's safe. People have been so embarrassed to get called to a court case and have to read the transcript of what they wrote in a text or in an email. So please always look back and double check what you write, remembering that they can't see your body language, and therefore they may not get that you're making a joke or whatever. If you do somehow get a text from a student or a parent, do not respond, because all that does is confirm to them that they got the right number. Facebook can be such a huge problem. Put every security feature on there that you can. Do not give it out to anybody. And you're bound to be friends at some point with the parents of some of your students, and you just can't share those kinds of things with them. There are cases in the United States that have gone all the way to the upper courts where folks have posted pictures of themselves out drinking on vacation or whatever, and you would think that that would be a safe thing that wouldn't affect you in your job because it was on private time, right? But educators in all positions are held to a higher standard by the court. And so our attorneys are always emphasizing that you don't have absolute freedom of speech or the right to do some of the things that you would do perhaps as a non-educator. If you stumble on something on the internet that's inappropriate, that's one of those times when you immediately go tell your supervisor that that happened, because some districts actually go through the logs all the time to see what sites folks have been on so that they can potentially block things that kids are trying to get into and so on. And it's not hard to stumble on something that you didn't need to. So just be upfront about it, explain your mistake and that you got off of it immediately.
Just a quick story about that too, because it does happen. And I had a teacher, I worked at Laramie County School District 1, and we were doing a PLC, a professional learning community, together in the summer. And I was a second grade teacher at the time, working with a kindergarten teacher. And this teacher, just hilarious teacher. I mean, right now, it's kind of a funny story, but back then it was absolutely shocking. So it was President's Day, and she was teaching her kids about presidents on the smart board. And then a lot of the questions came from the kids, like, oh my gosh, tell me about the president. Where does the president live? The White House. So she went to whitehouse.com. And if you know anything about whitehouse.com, not whitehouse.gov, whitehouse.com was a quorum site, and it wasn't blocked by the district. So there's the kindergarten class looking at whitehouse.com's landing page, and she is trying to take her teacher vest and cover it up, but it was just projected on her teaching vest. So it was catastrophic. Can you imagine the emails that happened and the fallout that happened because of that? It was a simple, honest mistake, but even in the midst of your, teachable moments, really make sure that in the back of your mind you're really thinking about what potentially could pop up on the screen.
I would say the biggest thing is the last bullet on there, document, document, document. So you stumbled on that site, you reported it to your supervisor, but also make some notes about that as to when it happened and how, and just tuck those away somewhere so that you've got a record of what happened in case it would ever get questioned. Because you can bet those kids are going to go home and tell mom and dad, and you never know who might come up with some question over it, so just always do that. One thing that they didn't bring up earlier on the application piece, and I would say this is kind of along this thing. One of the questions on there is, have you ever been convicted, right? Convicted of, is it a felony, right? Or a misdemeanor. If you have ever had anything, a DUI or anything that's on an adult record, it has to be reported on there. Doesn't mean you won't get your license, but if it shows up in the background check and you didn't report it, then you may not get your license because you weren't totally honest. So that kind of, I think, fits in with some of this as well.
So that's kind of the ethical portion of it. And really, to boil it down and kind of synthesize it, if you will, you guys are teachers. What are teachers? They're leaders. What does it mean to be a leader? It means people hold you in trust. When you're a leader and people hold you in trust, they have expectations on you. And oftentimes you're revered, and you're given really great Christmas presents at Christmas and going away presents, and your parents get you wonderful gifts and things like that. And that's all wonderful and dandy. But when the tide changes and parents or anybody in the public changes their perception of you, that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of the preparedness part of it. To be held in trust means that there's a different eye on you. You're held to a different expectation. And again, this is not to scare, it's just to prepare you. It's to kind of give you that idea that you have some other extra things on you. Pharmacists are really, expected to know the drugs, and if there's an interaction, you expect that they'll catch it, so you don't take something and essentially have either a bad illness or die. Teachers have an ethical expectation and a trustee expectation of making sure that their kids are being taken care of. So you're held to that higher expectation whether you like it or not. I mean, it's just ingrained into our culture, and people really have that expectation for you. So again, it's not to scare, but it's really just to prepare. Make sure that you're thinking about what you're doing. Think a few steps ahead too. It's always great to have a buddy teacher, especially your mentor teacher, to bounce things off of. As a teacher, I don't think this is hyper-vigilant, but I had my buddy teacher, and whenever something would happen with a parent or an email or something would go wrong, I would have her document it and have a file folder in her room. Because if that thing came back up to me, or if I got called to the carpet, I would ask my mentor teacher, my team teacher, to say, hey, go grab that folder. We can start talking about this right now. So it's about being prepared. And it is a little bit of extra work, but it keeps you safe. It keeps you as a professional safe. It keeps kids safe. It helps you really manage that gray area and operate successfully in it. So does that make sense? Excellent. So if you potentially do something wrong, or what are you held to, we do have some Chapter 9 rules and regs, and you can get on our website and check some of those out too. So there's reprehensible conduct, felonies, and different things like that, but should you, or should anybody, or should you see it happen, because that's one of your ethical responsibilities as a teacher too, is to report. In fact, it's in our Chapter 9 rules, which is failure to report knowledge of reprehensible conduct. We can actually hold you to that too. So it's really making sure that you keep people honest, you yourself remain honest, and operate as a professional too. So I'm going to hand it over to Ashley too, just to really briefly give you a guideline of exactly what happens when we intake a discipline case. Hopefully none of you will ever have to happen, but I guess it's kind of good.
Before I go to the next slide, I really quickly just wanted to go over the Chapter 9, Section 7 rules. I've been with PTSB for almost 6 years, and throughout I transitioned from the receptionist to the executive assistant position, and so I really got to see the general questions, and then now my role works more with the board directly as well as the disciplinary cases. I am responsible for reviewing every single background that comes through and every single statement that comes to our office. So I have a lot of contextual background as far as the variety of unethical situations that educators can get into. And again, like Nick said, we're really not here to scare you and doom and gloom you. Our purpose is we want to protect those students, but we also want to protect you. We want to prepare you. And part of the problem that we're seeing is that we're getting a lot of, nobody's reporting anything to protect these students. We're all just assuming it's the bystander effect. Everyone's just like, oh, somebody else is taking care of that. Somebody else saw that. Somebody else reported that. And that's just not, it's not happening. And everyone in the state of Wyoming that's of a certain age, I believe, is a mandatory reporter. So just keep that in mind. Keep yourself safe, but also keep your students safe. Really quick, I just wanted to touch on one that, as you guys are getting ready to go out into the workforce, you're going to be signing contracts. And some of you may get really eager as you go to those teacher fairs and you're like, oh, hey, look, they want to offer me a position, and you just signed with the first school that offers you a position, which is great, but keep in mind of that contract that you're signing. We recently just had an issue with an educator that hasn't even been in the classroom yet because he signed a contract with one school district, and his dream school district had an opening, and he was offered a position there as well. Well, he had already signed with another school district, and so he ended up not losing one job but 2 jobs, and is currently unemployed. And now the first school district that he applied with filed a complaint against him with our office, which I'll go into right now. So they filed a complaint against him for breach of contract, and so he did have disciplinary action on his license. And he hasn't even been in the classroom yet. So I just want you guys to be mindful of that as you start to apply and get offers. So going back to just the general complaint process and the disciplinary process. We have 2 committees, 2 sets of committees. The application review committee, which reviews all applications that either do not meet our licensure requirements or have either checked yes to the disciplinary question or the conviction question, or have been disciplined in another jurisdiction and are applying for initial licensure with our office. That's the application review committee, which we often refer to as the ARC. We also have what we call the investigative committees, and we have 2 of them. Each of the 3 committees is consistent of 2 of our 13 board members. We do that so that the educator has proper and due process, because if it gets to the point where it has to go to a hearing or before the board, then they have unbiased members of the board that haven't reviewed their case and can make a fair judgment at that point. So initially what happens is we, like I said, if it's an ERC one, we'll just review the application and decide if it's something that needs to be escalated to the ERC, or we'll receive a complaint, and anyone can file a complaint. We accept complaints from the public, other educators, or the district. Once we get a complaint, we will open up a disciplinary file or an investigative file. Once it does that, we assign it to an investigative committee or the ERC. We do an investigation, which we do a lot of internet research. I call Nick the guru on Facebook stalking. So again, Nick is very good at that. So if something comes up, we'll probably be looking to see if you have anything on there, and if there's any clues as far as that goes. Next, after we investigate, the IC will meet and make what we call a preliminary decision. That could be, if it's an initial application, we may decide to preliminarily deny, or we may decide to, our board is allowed to either deny, suspend, revoke, or refuse to renew. So depending on what the application is or the file, we can do any of those. And then if an educator is formally disciplined, so if they were revoked, denied, suspended, any of those, we are partnered with NASDAQ, which is the national, what we call the database, where we can report so that if an educator decides, oh, all right, well, I'm screwed in Wyoming, so I'm going to go to another state. We want to make sure, especially because we've had sex cases and stuff like that, we want to make sure that those people are reported so that those other states can look into that and say, oh, okay, they've had an issue that we want to definitely look into, and then they have jurisdiction to deny their area.
So that's the first part of our presentation. This next hour, we'll be talking about, we're almost done. So, again, we're trying to make you savvy, right? Again, you gotta, I use this quote all the time, you gotta read reality truthfully. There's expectations that you gotta have as a teacher, and we're here to help prevent that. You know, our preventative job right here is probably gonna save Ashley and I, hopefully it'll save Ashley and I a lot of time in taking any cases. It'll also keep kids safe, because it's the number one thing we do as a professional teaching standards. We make sure that the kids of Wyoming, are being taught by competent, ethical educators across the whole state, which means the kids are safe, which means that teachers are savvy, which means teachers are making great decisions. And we're building up teachers to make and be able to make those great decisions. So as you go into your practicums and your first years on the job, be safe, be savvy, ask lots of questions. Err on the side of, ooh, I over-documented that. I don't think anybody's been regretful for over-documenting. It might take a little bit of time, but it's just what the savvy teacher does. So if there's anything that we leave you with right now is really be savvy. If you have any questions, ask. There's a multitude of people out there that really can give you a lot of great advice in terms of how to successfully operate in that gray area, how to report if necessary, and how to be a really, really successful teacher. So with that is the end of our presentation. We will definitely be around for some questions. Do we have any specific questions, general questions right now from anybody?